Alien Romulus is set to hit theaters this weekend, and the interquel, which is a term I just learned, will follow a group of space colonists who come across a derelict space station, and while scavenging it, they come across the most terrifying life form in space. And while Romulus is taking place in between Alien and Aliens, I still wanted to rewatch some of the Alien movies just to kind of like get myself in the vibe of that franchise, hype myself up a little bit. I mostly focused on the prequel series. I did rewatch Aliens just because Aliens is fun. I tried to watch the third and fourth one for the first time, and the third one really rubbed me the wrong way, so I quit there and I just focused on the prequels. So in case you didn't have time this week, I'm gonna give you a recap of the prequel series leading up to what we're going to see in Alien Romulus, so that you can go into the movie theater prepared. So we're gonna go in timeline order. I'm ignoring the Alien versus Predator movies because those movies in the timeline technically come first, but they mess up everything in Prometheus and Alien Covenant, so I'm just gonna stick with those ones. So we're gonna start off with Prometheus, which takes place in the year 2093 in the movies, which is about 30 years before the events of Alien. We're introduced to scientists Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway, who discover a star map that has surfaced in several of Earth's ancient cultures. They assemble a crew funded by the Weyland Corporation and travel to LV-223, where they expect to find what they call the engineers, or the creators of us, humankind. And we are introduced to one such engineer when the film opens, and we can see that they are definitely humanoid. And whether they have actually created humans is up for debate, or maybe it's more of an evolutionary thing. That's never quite answered. It's not really the point. What we do see in that opening is that these engineers have a biological weapon, which is going to become important to the xenomorph's evolution. So when the crew arrives on the planet, they find this structure that's very obviously man-made. But upon investigation, they kind of start making a guess that the engineers have possibly gone extinct. But one of the crew becomes infected with what appears to be this biological weapon and dies. The crew's synthetic on board, David, becomes curious about the pathogen and becomes fueled by his crazy ideas about creation and evolution. He purposefully infects Charlie, who passes it on to Shaw in the form of an alien baby. When she realizes what's happened, Shaw gets the alien baby removed from her via this automated surgical table, and what comes out looks very similar to what we would think of as like a face grabber. So with that, we kind of see the first step in this evolutionary process. After Shaw's entire crew has died, she faces off with one of the engineers who has been kept in stasis this entire time. Shaw manages to escape by sicking her alien baby, which by this point now looks like a giant tentacle-y face grabber thing. She sicks him on the engineer. Meanwhile, Shaw and David take the engineer spacecraft and head off to the engineer's actual home planet, with Shaw saying she wants to find out why the engineers were going to kill off humankind with the pathogen. And in the final scene, we see something bursting forth from the engineer back on LV-223, something that looks suspiciously like the xenomorphs we're used to seeing. That leads us to the follow-up in the prequel series, Alien Covenant. This one takes place about 10 years after Prometheus, so it's kind of like squarely in between Prometheus and Alien. We're introduced to the colony ship USCSS Covenant, which is carrying a small crew plus thousands of colonists and human embryos in cryostasis. They're on their way to their new home planet, Origai 6, when the crew is suddenly awoken early by a blast that damages some parts of the ship. So while the crew is making these repairs and getting ready to kind of go back to sleep before they get to the planet, they intercept a transmission, which ends up being from who we know is Elizabeth Shaw. So the crew realizes that this transmission is coming from a human being. They decide to investigate, and they find out it's coming from a planet that appears is even a better atmosphere and home for them than Origai 6. So they go to investigate. When they get there, they find David, who's identical to the crew's synthetic Walter. After they investigate the planet, a few crew members are attacked and infected. We learn David has been experimenting with the pathogen on the life forms of the planet, basically like wiping everything out with this experimentation, including Dr. Shaw. In his isolation, his crazy ideas about creation and evolution have somehow gotten crazier. And now he's kind of taken up the mantle of the engineers wanting to wipe out the human race. But instead of just wiping them out, he wants to use them to create more aliens who he sees as like the perfect being, the peak of evolution. The movie ends with the remaining crew thinking that they've successfully escaped, only for them to realize as they're being put into cryosleep that their synthetic Walter has actually been left on the planet and killed, presumably, and replaced with David, who now has thousands of colonists at his disposal and a new planet for the aliens to inhabit. Super dark and sinister ending, but that brings us to Alien, the original, which of course takes place in the year 2122, and we are following the commercial towing rig Nostromo, which is on its way back to Earth when it picks up a transmission from LV-426, which is only important because it comes from the same system as LV-223 from Prometheus. They're beholden to investigate the signal, and on that planet they find a derelict spaceship and hundreds of egg-like objects. So a face grabber, of course, manages to latch itself onto one of the crew, and they take him back to the Nostromo to try and save him. From there, y'all know what happens. The alien eventually bursts forth from the infected crew member in one of the most iconic horror movie scenes ever, kills everyone except for Ripley, who manages to escape on one of the ship's lifeboats. Of course, she realizes that the alien has stowed away with her, and she has to save herself once again by blasting the alien into space. Going into Romulus, I'm hoping that there are going to be a couple of hints or maybe Easter eggs as to where the alien that they're encountering this one has come from, or hints to how it got there. I really like that the prequel series have opened up like several avenues for this species, I guess, of xenomorph to exist, and therefore there are tons of stories that could be told within this within this world, in this franchise. Because if we count them back, on one hand we have the alien left on LV-223 from Prometheus, although unless there are other organisms or other people that stop there, there's no telling how that single alien is faring right now. Then of course we have Ripley, who I just mentioned, blasts one into space, and we don't know everything about the xenomorphs, which is also what makes them so scary. So we don't know how they might survive out in the black, you know, out in the dead of space. They might be able to withstand that, and that alien might just be floating around until it encounters another ship, maybe. We don't know. And of course, we have David, who we have no reason not to believe has unleashed thousands of aliens into the universe on Origai 6. And we don't know if they were contained to Origai 6 either. We do know he does make a transition to say that some of the crew has died and they are on their way to Origai 6. So we could maybe reasonably believe that in the future other colonists might go to that planet and unfortunately find out what happened there. So there's no telling how much lore Romulus is going to expand upon. I think part of the horror of these movies is that we have no idea where various characters might encounter these aliens. There's, like I said, there's tons of avenues that have opened up. That and the fact that these characters are isolated out in space. So there's no help for you once you encounter one of these xenomorphs, as the tagline suggests. I'm really excited to see this new Alien movie. It's directed by Fede Alvarez, who did the Evil Dead remake, which I know most of us agree is one of the better horror remakes out there. And even though this isn't technically a remake, it still bodes well for Alien Romulus. Let me know what your thoughts on it are in the comments. Are you excited? Are you indifferent? Are you really not excited about it? And next video will be a review of Alien Romulus, of course. So I will see you then. Until then, stay strange. Bye.